Yes, indeed, Parliament has been busy with that now. Amending the Constitution to allow for land expropriation without compensation is a step closer to reality, as you say, partner. The matter is now a resolution of Parliament after both the National Council of Provinces, that's the NCOP, and the National Assembly voted in support of the amendment this week. But there's still a long road ahead before the Constitution is actually changed. Well, joining us to unpack this from Cape Town this morning is Phephelaphi Dube from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Ms. Dube, good morning. Thank you very much for your time. It looks like Parliament has done the first phase after we saw public participation earlier, but not everybody is happy around this. But as far as constitutional processes are going, this seems to be progressing pretty much smoothly. Okay, looks like she's not able to hear us. We'll try and we'll try and get hold of her later on. I don't know if we can. Should we try? Okay, Ms. Dube, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Oh, there you are. We lost you there for a while. Apologies. I was saying now that Parliament, both houses of Parliament, the NCOP and the National Assembly, have now resolved to support the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution. There's next steps still to come. But at this stage, after public participation and this stage of Parliament, pretty much like things are going smoothly from a constitutional process perspective. Or am I wrong?
Well, perhaps not necessarily going smoothly, given the objections that some political parties have raised concerning the actual public participation aspects of the proceedings. So going forward, obviously, it's going to be interesting to see what sort of arguments the DA is going to raise. In fact, there have been concerns from the DA that some of the considerations had not been properly considered before the report was adopted. And this might going ahead, and if the courts find in favor of the DA, then this might, in a sense, bring to a halt the current process that's taking place.
So this is likely, depending what happens next. We'll be speaking to later on in the program to Mr. Louis Nzimande, who co-chaired the Parliament's Joint Constitutional Review Committee, just about the next steps. But from what you are saying, it's likely this might end up at the Constitutional Court itself in a few months' time.
Well, absolutely. But we also need to bear in mind the importance that public participation plays in the legislative process. So there's been a series of cases that have come before the Constitutional Court. And I think the latest case is a case that was decided on Tuesday, where once again the court makes it quite clear that the legislature has a duty to take into consideration the views of ordinary South Africans, and they have a duty to make sure that Parliament becomes accessible to the ordinary people, and that once this accessibility is made, that Parliament then has a duty to consider those views that ordinary South Africans have placed. So in this instance, it would be interesting to see the manner in which the Constitutional Review Committee conducted its work. We know that there were extensive public participation processes all across the country, but I think the bigger question will really be what sort of questions was the Constitutional Review Committee asking, what sort of responses did they receive, and how exactly are those questions and how exactly are those responses captured in that particular report? And is that particular report a genuine reflection of the wants and desires of the ordinary people on the streets? And not just that, but then the ultimate process of adopting the report, does it reflect the genuine concerns of people on the streets? So these are the sort of questions that the courts are going to grapple with. And of course, given that ultimately it's not so much a legal question as it is a political question, so it's quite clear that the DA is going to use whatever powers they have in order to ensure that this process, which is chiefly driven by the ANC and the EFF, does not go ahead.
Yeah, and those two parties you've just mentioned now, the ANC and the EFF, seemingly from reports we've seen since yesterday, they are insisting that the process can and should be concluded before the general elections. It looks like the process of redrafting Section 25 of the Constitution is going to be in for a rough ride then.
Well, in terms of the statement that was released by the National Assembly, it would appear that today the ANC is going to table a motion in terms of which, if the motion is adopted, then either an ad hoc committee or the Justice Committee in Parliament is then going to be tasked with drafting the particular amendment to Section 25 of the Constitution. But I think on that note, it's also interesting to note the remarks that were made by the leader of the EFF, who seemed to imply that the EFF may not necessarily want the amendment to be made before elections, probably meaning that the EFF might want to come back after elections, possibly with more seats, in order to ensure that the EFF has a stronger voice in Parliament. So going ahead, it's going to be interesting to note what exactly the two positions between these two competing parties will be. And I think that's what's going to influence the process going forward.
Ms. Phephelaphi Dube, thank you very much for your insights, as usual, very insightful indeed. That's Phephelaphi Dube from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Now,